Hey guys, my name's Sammy Binswanger. I'm a tutor at the Algonquin Writing Center, located in Massachusetts, and we are members of the Algonquin Regional High School community.
Hi guys, my name is Jared Lipkin. I am one of two co-presidents of said writing center. As those of you who are here a little bit early witnessed, The Rise of Skywalker, I believe, is a good movie. I will leave that up to your own interpretation. You can form the impressions about me that you want.
Hi, I'm Eva Naik, and I am one of the co-operations managers at the Algonquin Writing Center. And I like to draw and paint in my free time. And just to set up a little bit of an agenda for today, we're going to start off with a little bit of reflection and discussion. We're going to move into some of the context to our research that we conducted as part of a class we all took during the first semester of this academic year. And then we're going to kind of talk about the results and conclusions of that research. And as all of you are doing right now, if you could please keep yourself muted, like when other people are talking, that would be really great, so we can hear what everyone has to contribute to the conversation. And so our presentation is called Peer Perspectives, How Writers View Their Tutors.
So as Eva laid out so wonderfully in the agenda, we're going to start with a small written reflection and discussion. And so that's actually going to be done in the form of a word cloud. So Jared, fantastic with technology, is going to pop a link into the chat. If you guys could all click that link, and then in a couple words or maybe single word phrase, answer the question, in your opinion, what characterizes an ideal writing tutor? We're going to do about 2 or 3 minutes, and then at the end of that, we'll all be able to look at that word cloud. So go ahead. Great question. So the prompt we're answering is, in your opinion, what characterizes an ideal writing tutor?
And just a note, if you guys have more than one thing that you want to add, you're more than welcome to submit multiple responses. They'll all pop up.
A few people, or one person in the chat was saying the link wasn't working. Is everyone else doing okay with that? Working for other people, or it might just be their Wi-Fi?
Nathan,
Awesome.
if you want, you can just throw your responses in the chat and we can see them in here. All right, we got quite a few responses in. So I'm going to put the results of that up on the screen now. Can you all see those okay? Good, okay. So as we can see, looks like the most frequent response was kind, kindness, several examples of good listening, thoughtfulness, encouraging, all really good traits, all sort of exactly what I was expecting to see, similar to a lot of the results that we ended up getting when we did our research. And so, as Eva said, this presentation is the result of a half-year class that we took at the start of the year. And in that class, we wrote a full research paper. And the center of our question was the following. To what extent do writers' perceptions about the Writing Center align with current tutors' perceptions? Basically, we wanted to look at how do writers view our Writing Center in our school, and is that perception at all accurate? We wanted to know, how did students come to hold those views? How did tutors view the Writing Center? And what happens if those views don't really align well? And if a student misunderstands the Writing Center, what does that mean for us as a center? And what does that mean for us as a school? And that was sort of the basis of our core questions. And we were sort of expecting to find a disconnect between students and tutors' perceptions, because we have the data and we know that while we are frequently visited by the broader student population, we know there are a lot of students who never step foot in the Writing Center. We hear it in the Writing Center, people walking by. What is this? Like, is this, oh, I think that's the Writing Center. You know, people just don't really know exactly what's going on there. And so we knew there's room for improvement in our marketing, but some of our results surprised us in how much students did understand what we're all about. So we asked our students the same, in our survey, we asked students and tutors the same question that we just asked you. And results from students looked like this. Similar to you guys, not judgy, helpful, good writer, understanding, encouraging. And tutors responded pretty similarly. As you can see, not judgy pops up, helpful pops up again, confident, encouraging. So there was a lot of overlap between what students were looking for and what tutors were looking for, which is a good thing because it means that we've all got the same goals. But it also left us wondering, all right, so why aren't people visiting the Writing Center then?
So now you're kind of probably wondering, like, why do you do this? You know, are you filling a requirement for class? Like, what's the context? So our main goal is we focused really closely on the core values of our Writing Center, Algonquin Writing Center. And those 4 values are as follows: collaboration, agency, inclusivity, and growth. So our research questions, those inquiry questions that Jared just laid out, were focused mostly on these values. And so we wanted to conduct a couple, research avenues of research to try and answer those questions. So in order to answer those questions, we had to, prior to starting our research, we conducted a literature review. So the following 3 sources are ones that we found, a couple of the many that we read, that we found particularly important and crucial in our research. So Olivia Buck, her study took place at a university-level writing center, and the goal of her study was to answer the question, where do students derive their perceptions of the Writing Center and of the Writing Center's goals and purpose? So her data was gathered from first-time visitors in the Writing Center through questionnaires and interviews, as well as interviews with tutors, etc. And so she concluded that students enter their tutorial sessions, or tutoring sessions, with various forms of prior knowledge about the Writing Center. And they seem to see the Writing Center as a service focused on creating better pieces as opposed to a place that can be focused on skill development and long-term improvement. Moving on to that second source, Aaron Colton, his was an extremely crucial piece. We found ourselves going back and just going back and reviewing his findings and his methods really frequently throughout our research. And so his article analyzes the results of a survey taken again at a university level of both graduate and undergraduate students, as well as the university staff. So the goal of his study was to compare participants' self-reported demographics and their academic information, identity factors which include race and gender, as well as their GPA, courses they may be taking or have taken, and how those may relate to misconceptions or preconceived notions about the Writing Center. He concluded that non-directive methods help students who have already had a solid understanding of those basic writing practices, but can be extremely useless to those without access to more fundamental writing techniques. And multiple lines of interaction and outreach are extremely necessary to target those varying individuals with different identity factors. Finally, we looked at Lori Salem's piece, and her study, like the other two, took place at a university level, but hers actually focused on the school's incoming freshman class. So the goal of her study was to offer kind of a comparative analysis of both users and non-users of the Writing Center, and reveal significant differences in the academic and demographic characteristics of those two different groups. She concluded that not all students are as likely to visit the Writing Center, and that's due to those identity factors that Colton also mentioned, and are completely dependent of the individual. So the following slide has 3 quotes from all 3 of those sources. The first one from Olivia Buck reads, "Many students who enter the Writing Center have little idea of how their sessions will take place." And we thought that that was very interesting. And so that when we entered, or when we began our research, we were kind of under the same impression, like, oh, you know, this Olivia Buck has done this research and it's come out with this kind of an answer. And when our results kind of disagreed with that, we were surprised.
This quote from Aaron Colton, which reads, "Multiple lines of outreach and advertising are necessary to target the dissimilar impressions of varying student demographics," is a pretty wordy way of saying that this is why this is important. If students of all different backgrounds, socioeconomic backgrounds, racial backgrounds, if students are misunderstanding the Writing Center, centers need to make sure that we take multiple avenues to fix those misperceptions, because students all learn differently, students all have access to information in different ways. And so it's important as a center to accommodate all of those different learning styles and contexts. So we need to take multiple different types of outreach and advertising to make sure that our message is getting across to everyone.
And the final quote from the article by Lori Salem is, "A student's choice to visit the Writing Center is also understood as an endorsement of the Writing Center itself." And like Jared was saying about Aaron Colton's quote and his paper, the Writing Center is not just separate from the student body, but is a part of the people who use it. It's not like 2 separate entities. It's kind of the writers who choose to come to the Writing Center and the ideas that they have about the Writing Center in turn like work with the Writing Center and can influence how others see the Writing Center.
And so I included here again our 3 core questions. And like I hinted at earlier, the main way we went about answering these questions was we surveyed the broader Algonquin student population, and we surveyed the tutor staff. And we were basically looking to see, how does the Algonquin Regional High School population view the Algonquin Writing Center? So we asked several multiple choice questions and one open response question. That open response question is the same one that we asked you guys at the beginning. And we showed some of that data earlier on. But we were really looking to see where do students and tutors agree with their perception of the writing center, and where do they disagree, and what might those disagreements mean? And as we'll get to a little bit later, we found that for the most part, students really had a pretty accurate understanding of the writing center, which left us a little bit confused, and we'll get into why. But we surveyed 171 students. This was roughly 10% of the Algonquin student population, and we surveyed 30 tutors of the writing center, which is just about all of them. And we broke it up by class to make sure that we got an even distribution of grades and course levels. So we've got the course levels on the left and the grades going across the top. We surveyed 3 freshman classes. This was all unleveled. We surveyed 3 different history classes because our history at our school is unleveled. And then we tried to get an even breakdown in the other grades of the courses that were available. So for example, the juniors, we got 1 AP language course, 2 honors junior English classes, and 1 CP English junior class. And so we broke it up like this. Total, we looked at 12 different classes. And as you can see, we got a pretty good distribution across grade level and course level. And we did this to see, we wanted to make sure that no matter what experience people had, that we were covering their interactions with the writing center. Just a couple of sample questions from the survey that we asked. Have you ever had an appointment? Have you ever had an appointment at the Algonquin Writing Center? We wanted to know this pretty obviously. We wanted to say, like, all right, what percentage of the students are coming to the Writing Center? And we were also looking to see if students had a better understanding of the Writing Center if they had visited. And for the most part, we found that they didn't, that students who didn't visit the Writing Center had just as good a grasp of what we can provide as students who had visited. We also asked, what types of assignments can you work on at the Algonquin Writing Center? Again, this was just to see how well do students understand what services we can provide. And this question turned out to be a really interesting one. If you had to guess, what is the average cumulative weighted GPA of an Algonquin Writing Center tutor? We asked this because in Colton's piece, one of his hypotheses was that students are unlikely to visit their writing centers if they think there's a level of, that they want to visit a center if it's approachable. And if the center doesn't feel approachable, then they're going to be less likely to visit. And so because of that, we wanted, and Colton suggested that tutors could be perceived as a lot smarter than the average student, and that would cause some of that lack of approachability. And so we wanted to see if we thought that was present at Algonquin. And Eva will get to this later, but what we found was it didn't. They predicted that Algonquin tutors had similar GPAs as the average Algonquin student. And the final question that I included here was the same one that we've talked about already. In your opinion, what characterizes an ideal writing tutor? But now I will turn it over to Eva, and we're going to talk about some of the results and conclusions of this data.
Yeah, so it's the same question that keeps coming up again. Characteristics of an ideal writing tutor. So the pinkish orangish color is the percentage of student responses with the trait, which is on the bottom on the x-axis, and the blue is the percentage of tutor responses that had those same keywords. And what this really showed us is that overall, students and tutors used a lot of the same words. Easy to work with was a big one that came up, along with a good listener and an eye for mistakes. But as you can see by this graph, that besides the knowledge of the writing process and helps achieve good grades, which are both on the right, those were like the same words that kept showing up over and over again, suggesting to us that most of the student body does have a pretty accurate representation of what the Writing Center can do and how tutors are viewing the Writing Center themselves. And here are some more bar graphs. So if we take a look at the top left one, which of these statements do you believe to be true about Algonquin Writing Center tutors? And it just has a couple of statements that we asked on the multiple choice. And as you can see, the bars on the graph are pretty even for both tutor and student distribution. Just as a reminder, the blue is the tutors and the pinkish orange is the students. And like the other graph, it showed to us that students knew what they could, for the most part, knew what they could do at the Writing Center and what kind of resources our Writing Center offered to them on a pretty daily basis. And at the bottom, there's a graph in green and brown. The green represents tutors and the brown represents students. And it just goes through what kind of projects and pieces of writing can you come to the Writing Center for. And whilst things like posters, videos, and presentations, along with science or engineering reports, were not as represented within the student body, we found that a lot of students were still had a pretty good idea of what they could work on at the Writing Center, and it was pretty much reflected along the tutor population as well. And here is some of the more surprising data to us. Have you ever made an appointment at the Algonquin Writing Center? And of the 171 students we surveyed across 4 grade levels and 3 class levels, only 22% have ever made an appointment or utilized one of the Writing Center's resources, which considering that a lot of them had some of the same views as tutors and there was not much of a disconnect in what our Writing Center can help them with, we found this pretty surprising. And as Jared mentioned earlier about the GPAs, at the bottom, there is the student predicted tutor GPA versus actual reported GPA of tutors. So we were shocked to find that students actually underestimated the GPA of a tutor. And just for a little bit of context, our school has a weighted GPA out of a 5.0 scale. And what was a little more surprising to us is that the average prediction of the tutor GPA by students, which is the bar on the left, was actually very, very close to our school's overall weighted GPA. And this kind of puzzled us because it kind of contradicted what Colton said about the Writing Center being a little more unapproachable, maybe because of perceived smartness or intelligence over the normal student.
So we're going to kind of throw it back out there to you guys. And this next portion is actually going to be, eventually we'll each unmute ourselves. You also as audience members will unmute yourselves and give your 2 cents. We're going to take about 2 or 3 minutes. If you have a notebook, maybe pull that out and jot down some ideas about this question. We'll be discussing it in a moment or two. And the question reads, our research shows most students have an accurate perception of the Algonquin Writing Center. So why do you think only 20% have visited? So again, just take 2 or 3 minutes, jot a few notes down, or even just brainstorm. And then we'll come back and unmute and start a discussion.
And there's obviously no right answer to this question. We're asking this of you, because this is the same question we were left with asking from our data. We wanted to know, if students have such an accurate perception, why is it that no one else is visiting? And so we're really looking for ideas from you, possible explanations for that, because we also don't know, and we'll offer our suggestions, but there's no right answer here.
Also, to kind of add my 2 cents onto that, if you feel that this isn't the case at your school, something might even be to think about, what are some ways you could promote that, and alongside promoting what your writing center does, how can you continue to do that while also engaging the student body? So this is kind of just a time for you to brainstorm and reflect.
We'll return at maybe, between 12:30 and 12:35. So take some time, give it some thought. Again, as Jared said, no right answer, no wrong answer. You got it. William asked a really good question. I'm not sure if everyone saw it in the chat, but he said, are your appointments offered during the school day or after classes have finished? So during that first semester, when we were all taking this course, it was an asynchronous period, so we all had it during a different block in the day. So to answer that question, yes, students during the first semester were able to come during the day, as well as appointments in the afternoon. Great question.
We also offered evening sessions, I believe at 8 o'clock. So you could Zoom in. We hosted Google Meet sessions, which were pretty poorly attended, but that option was available. So it was during the school day, right after school, and during the evening.
On top of that, though this doesn't really work with who's visited, we have a pen pal tutoring service where students can send in their writing prompt, as well as their however far they've gotten on that piece of writing. And then tutors will respond within 24 to 48 hours.
There's another great question in the chat that about the 20% seeming really high. We saw that as okay, that's really great. 20% of our student body is utilizing the Writing Center and all it has to offer. But kind of as a writing center, like we mentioned before, our core values of collaboration and inclusivity, primarily focusing on inclusivity, we want to see how we can engage the rest of the student body. It doesn't mean just coming in for a session to receive help or some suggestions, but it could also be through events that we offer. But just in general, we want to include just more of the student body, because we just really care about everyone's opinions and their views, and we want to help the writing community as a whole.
In addition to that, while 20% is great, we were also just a little bit thrown off because the numbers suggested that more than 20% were interested in the writing center and thought it could help them, and yet still hadn't. So rather than, we don't exactly have a specific number in terms of, we want 50% of students to come visit the writing center, but we were really perplexed and intrigued by the students who said they thought the writing center could help them and thought it was a valuable resource and understood what we could offer, and yet still hadn't visited. And so while that's a smaller chunk of the results, we were really intrigued by that.
All right, so it's about 12:33 now. If we're feeling okay, I think it's about time to open it up for some discussion. Yeah, so if you have thoughts, comments, maybe more questions, feel free to unmute, or if you feel more comfortable sending it in the chat, feel free. We got a mess. Oh, sorry. Was someone?
You can do that. Go for it.
Oh, okay.
This is me.
Okay. All right. So we have two, actually. We have one response from Alan and one response from Nathan. So Alan writes, I sometimes wonder about the number of students who are simply happy enough with B's or C's on their papers. As writing center people, we're very invested in writing, and it's hard for us to imagine folks who are sort of just meh about writing. I would say that's a very fair conclusion. I agree. All right. So Nathan says, sorry to type in the chat. I'm at school in the lecture hall. To answer your question, I think it really stems from some students not having the time. It seems like at your school, there's a good number of students that know how your writing center works, but they may not choose to visit because they don't have the time. Very fair, I would agree. A lot of students are piled with work and are unable to have the time to revise their assignments to work on, have so many assignments to work on for other classes. If only there was a way to make the relationship between writing heavy classes and the writing center more streamlined, so students feel overworked. So students that feel overworked feel they can slow down on their assignments and get the help they need to improve their writing. Oh, we have some awesome, we have more. Gabriella says, I was thinking that students may not be familiar with the mentors, which may push them away from attending. It's an interesting thought. Miss Stein says, I also can't help but wonder, I apologize, sorry, this got a little, about folks' time management. Making time after school for in-person is hard. You may have virtual in the evenings, but that's a little more scary. I would agree. It can be a little intimidating.
I can take over, Sammy, if you want. I can
Awesome.
read a couple.
Awesome.
Denise says a lot of people are insecure about their writing because they don't feel like it's their strong suit. So sometimes they might be scared or embarrassed working with tutors their age. Definitely, yeah. Catherine, I think at our school, there's a certain stigma surrounding going to the writing center, where students feel that if they go to the writing center, it makes it seem that they are not smart enough, good enough. Many students who perceive themselves as strong students feel they will be looked at differently if they go to help. That's really interesting. I'm not sure if we see that so much at our center, but I definitely know that exists at other places. But as I'm reading, and as Sammy was reading, I'm definitely noticing a theme of approachability and making sure that it's easy to physically access the writing center, but it's also, you want to make sure that everyone feels wanted at the center. And I know that speaks definitely to our core value of inclusivity. And I definitely think that's an important one to hone in on. Ms. Stein, it may be seen as too much work, making it more social. Older students don't want to work with younger writers. That makes sense. Like a sophomore, as a senior student might not want to be tutored by a sophomore tutor. Any data for student GPA of students who do come to tutoring? A lot of the students who come to our center are often the overachievers who don't need the help in the way we might expect. I don't have the data off of the top of my head, but I do believe that the majority, Eva, you might know this, the majority of students who come are in our honors classes. And therefore, I forget who it was who said, Alan at the beginning said that maybe students are simply happy enough with C's or B's. It definitely seems like maybe the students who are coming the most aren't the ones who need it, because they're also the ones who care the most about their writing and therefore get better grades and get into the higher classes, and it sort of creates this loop.
Yeah, to kind of speak to that, I know that I, as an operations manager, I go through a lot of the sessions and I'm constantly looking, and a lot of students are honors students. Sometimes it's the incentive of extra credit, and sometimes it's just that little, it's another set of eyes on their work, someone to bounce ideas off of. And that's why they're mainly in for an appointment. And kind of going back to, like, some students just really don't care that much because they are so swamped for time. Sometimes the minimum is enough for some students. So we have also been thinking about different ways we can engage writers outside of an academic concept. So we recently had one of our tutors start up a poetry club for poetry enthusiasts and just anyone who really wants to come to and write poetry and talk about it and just kind of have a good time. That is something that we offer. And I've attended a few of those, and I've noticed a lot of people who are not affiliated with the Writing Center do show up, and we all have a great time. So I think that's definitely something we should, as a broader community, should consider. Like, how do we engage students outside the academic concept, academic sphere, because writing doesn't just have to be about paragraphs and essays and lab reports.
I'm really intrigued by Alan's question, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, guys. Should struggling students be required to go to writing centers by teachers/instructors? I know I have some initial thoughts on that, but I'd love to hear what other people have to say. Michael, I was going to say I would love to make a writing center that is not all about grades. I'm definitely with you. I know I would love to see a writing center that strives towards just cultivating a love of writing, as opposed to and separating it from the grades. However, I don't know, that's not so easy to do. In our writing center, the executive board members, myself included, we run different families. And so each family has a project that we work on. And my project is the community writing project. So we're looking to just expand a culture of writing in a greater community. And it's proving to be a struggle. It's definitely worthwhile to fight for, but it's, when, especially going back to some of the other points that people have talked about, if people are just content with C's and B's, then it's going to be really hard to get people in the door if they're not concerned about their grade.
I think another thing is that writing doesn't have a concrete right or wrong. So, and it's also a process. We've discussed this between the three of us, and also Mr. Zarnecki, who's our one of our writing center directors. And we were kind of thinking, math, science, and sciences, those all have, like, you input your whatever numbers into the formula and you come out with an answer. Whereas writing really is a process, and it's not the most rewarding process at times, because, you submit something and you got to go back and edit it, or you submit a piece of writing that you think is great. And maybe someone who reads it has different opinions about it. And we just found, I think it's difficult to kind of feel good sometimes about your writing, and about your overall product, if that makes sense.
So sorry, Sammy, Eva, and Jared, there's so much great discussion. And I just want to let you know that you have about 5 minutes, 7 minutes tops. So you could either, continue to engage with some of the thoughts in the chat, or, bring your presentation to a close. But you have about 5 to 7 minutes.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. C. I would just say one last thing to wrap up this discussion. I would turn to what Amabel said in the chat, because this is one step that we are taking as a center, is that the course that Sammy, Eva, and I took this year, we're going to be shifting it a little bit so that tutors can be dedicated, available during class time, and working directly with teachers, working in the classrooms, almost more like a writing fellows program, if you know what those look like, which I think, like Belle said, can be a really good, accessible and low stress way to tutor. We don't have to worry about calling students in out of class to visit appointments if they're struggling, and it can be a much more casual interaction that makes the Writing Center seem more approachable and allows for the Writing Center to have a good name in the school without any individual feeling called out. With that, I think we should probably start to wrap this up. So Sammy, Eva, do you guys have any last thoughts?
I just want to say thank you to everyone for participating and having some great responses, great questions. The engagement's awesome. So thank you guys.
Yeah, pretty much the same for me. I thought it was pretty interesting how I saw a lot of my own kind of ideas and thoughts enforced in our discussion, but also I got a different perspective from a lot of you. You guys all brought up really great points, and I am very thankful that you guys are so participant, and yeah, thank you for coming.
Yeah, this was great. It was really informative for us, especially as we look to finalize the paper that we're hoping to publish on this. If any of you have any questions, want to continue this discussion, I know all three of us are more than happy to continue this discussion. We have our emails on the slides, along with our Writing Center email and our Writing Center Instagram. Please feel free to reach out. We would love to continue this discussion. Thank you all so much for coming.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.